back, everyone. I'd like to a motion to go back into public. I mean, proposed Councillor Smith, secondly Councillor Mitchell. All those in favour, please show. Aye. Thank you. So we're now back in public. Welcome to the media. You were early, and so we're now going to go to the item 1 on the agenda, and I'm going to ask Michelle to present this and some new words.
Fantastic. So from one dissatisfying situation to dissatisfying reporting. This one, from an officer's perspective, has been really challenging to put together because ultimately we have imperfect information. So there is no in-depth analysis here that tells you exactly which way we can go. We did not have the time to do that, and particularly with the moves that were made by Clutha and Central, it changed the proposition, it changed this paper right over at the very last possible moment. So I appreciate your patience for some of the changes that have been flicked around. I think there's just a few things that point out in here. Obviously, Dunedin City has met this morning and has voted for the twin unitary approach, 9-4 with 1 abstention. They have amended the wording of the resolution slightly to emphasise a catchment-based approach. So I've proposed here, I've circulated some revised wording in light of that for procedural clarity. Should you vote to go the same way that Dunedin went, we have the same language in our resolutions.
Has Stephen and Nikki got that? Great. Thank you.
Don is sharing that one.
Yeah, correct.
The changes that are made actually don't change the intent of the original items 5 and 6 at all. It just lays them out slightly different and creates ones 5, 6, and 7. I think you're all well versed in some of the challenges that this process has presented. Some of the things that we don't know include we don't know what off-ramps might mean or look like if we did participate in the Head Start process. Equally, we don't know what the backstop looks like or means if we don't participate in a Head Start process. It's exceptionally unusual for this council to ever take receipt of a no recommendation report. This is the first one I have ever written in my entire time at council, and it's the same approach that I think our friends in Waitaki had when they needed to put this vote to their councillors. And there are a number of councils across the country who have taken a no recommendation approach. That is because, as officers, whilst we want to fulfil all our Local Government Act obligations here, we just have not had the time or information in such a fashion to be able to give you the in-depth analysis you might ordinarily expect to see. So you have the information available to you from the Morrison Low report. I think you've all been pretty well informed throughout the 90-day process around what happened with the survey, the regional survey, what's been coming in and out of the mayoral forum. You've had a couple of public meetings on this, you've had a couple of workshops on this. So there has been some considerable ground traversed. However, equally, we haven't had the level of detail that you'd normally expect to see in those conversations. So this really is quite a political decision. All decisions are political, but this one more than most. It will be based on your experiential knowledge, your understanding of the communities, the district, those that are around us here. And you're very happy to take any questions you may have. Effectively, at this stage, there is no time to create a new proposal and find support from another council to join us. To put in a proposal to Head Start, you need 2 councils in the mix. All the other councils have had their meetings. There is no time for them to have an extraordinary meeting. This proposal, should you decide to put one in, has to be finished and submitted by the end of the day on Friday. So that's kind of where we're at. We're in the options that are in front of you are to support the Clutha Centre of Cargo model that's in front of the table. The other option is to work with Dunedin to put together a twin unitaries approach. There is also the approach to do nothing. That is not explicitly in here, but we'll have to address that in the resolutions if that's the way you want to go. Very happy to take any questions. Penny has supported this work as well.
You didn't mention the 3 unitaries, and we don't know that Waitaki is being accepted merging with Timaru. So therefore, I come back to what we have discussed since the first day, and also which is in the Morrison Low report, which is a rural council, which would be CODC, CDC, WPEN, and Waitaki, which in fact combined would be larger than we are. And the question has always been the hurdle of CODC and CDC would be too small at 45,000, but in fact, if you include Waitaki, it's 70,000. And so in effect, we collapsed from 5 councils to 3. Why is that not an option?
Because there has been no agreement between the two councils to pursue that as a Head Start proposal.
But if we align with Dunedin, we are making a proposal.
Yeah, because Dunedin approached us, well, approached John, asked if that was a Head Start proposal would be considered.
Right.
There has
But
been no approach.
What I'm suggesting is not a 2 unitary, but a 3 unitary align with Dunedin.
I understand the model, and it did get discussed at mayoral forum at various points on the way, but nobody has asked us to work with them to put together a proposal on a Head Start for that, and we didn't take any direction to approach anyone else on that basis.
So there are essentially 2 proposals that are going to be made for Head Start. Dunedin can make this on their own. No, they can't. They need us. So Dunedin need us to partner with them in order to put forward their proposal. They have already made a decision, so that's the only proposal that they've considered. And then the other one doesn't need us. They're going to submit it anyway. And so, as Michelle was saying, there is no option to put forward another proposal. We either do nothing, we agree to support Clutha and CODC with their one, or we agree to go together with Dunedin to basically put in another proposal that is counter to the Clutha CODC lead one. There's no time to do an alternative approach.
What I would say is that if this council decided, actually, no, that's the one for us, we want to chase it down, you're out of time for a Head Start proposal, but you could also say, well, we will not participate in any Head Starts, and actually we will direct staff to go and do all of the work to see what that kind of setup would look like further down the track.
Noting that in the meantime, the government could accept one or other of them.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, they'll only have one in front of them because Dunedin won't be able to put one in. It will only be the Dunedin on its own, Clutha, CODC and its proposal that the government will have in front of them.
Okay, Gav, your question.
Well, really, I was just going to clarify a question that you asked. Maybe you can answer this, Michelle. If Waitaki District Council, they have made a decision, a council decision, to go with Timaru and Mackenzie. So they're not part of these discussions. They've made their decision.
But it hasn't been accepted.
Well, no one's proposal's gone in yet to be accepted at all. But they aren't part of the considerations for the remaining Otago council. Was that correct?
So that's what they've asked for. That's what they believe their people are looking for them to move north. So that's the way that they focus their attention. However, the twin unitaries model, Dunedin could seek to drag Waitaki into the coastal if they wanted to, but there's a bit of a question mark.
I think just speaking to that, because there is a part of the Waitaki district which is very close to Dunedin, south of the Pomeroy, which very much identifies as Otago, and that's been recognised in all those discussions that if Waitaki go north, it's not necessarily all. So they've got one of the wards that may well form part of that coastal.
And would that come into the detail design part after?
Yeah, because they want to consult. So that's nobody's actually done their significant or whatever that will come after the principal decisions. So, but in terms of Waitaki, they're very much haven't been involved actively in looking at the target options, other than recognising that there is a part that may well proceed or sort of join with Dunedin.
I've got a couple more questions. Shall I?
Yep.
So the inland and coastal unitary authority model to get to unitary catchment based model, based on the Morning Law report, that purely looked at the existing council boundaries. Would there be potentially if this proposal goes out in the detailed design part of it to relook at where those boundaries might be changed or where they might actually end up for?
I think that would be a reasonable activity to do in the detailed design stage. Yeah, where the appropriate boundary lines.
So not necessarily on existing district council boundaries.
Not necessarily, but could be. Yeah.
the Head Start process is set up to enable that to happen in the process. It doesn't preclude it from happening.
Item 5 in this updated resolution we've got here says subject to the agreement of both councils. Does that refer to this agreement today by both councils, if both agree today, or is that a further agreement? Does it agree to work with the Dunedin Council?
I think it's the Head Start proposal itself. That's what that's referring to. So just so subject to the agreement, both councils submit a Head Start proposal.
So that proposal has to be in on Sunday.
Yes.
So do we have to have another meeting to agree something between now
No.
and then?
No, it would be, but the way this is phrased here, because you're asking staff to prepare it and authorize the mayor to sign it, I would be anticipating that we would be circulating the draft as part of that process. You may want to be more specific on that in the resolution.
So the reason I asked is that wording in the equivalent item that's in the report just says agree that QLDC submits a Head Start proposal to the Dunedin City Council. It doesn't have that subject to the agreement of both councils line. Which just to me sounds like we have to then agree it before it's submitted.
Point of clarification.
Yes,
I think that's a copy and paste of Dunedin City Council one, so I think that subject to agreement is actually talking about us, so we can probably remove those words.
So it's subject to today's
Yeah.
agreement.
This decision today, essentially.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Yeah. So that's really subject to agreement of both councils refers to this decision today. We agree to it. Dunedin already has, by what I understand.
Yep.
And that line is
unnecessary.
yeah,
That makes sense.
right.
Yeah, yeah, we'll do that.
Do I have another question? There seems to be some reluctance to consider the QLDC CDC proposal. I'm just wondering why. There are lots of examples where council, well not council as such, but people covered by the area-based three councils do already work together quite closely.
I think that's probably always
Yeah, it's
a
not
discussion
really-
at a table rather than asking.
Yeah.
We haven't got a regulation to speak to that, but I think that's a very important point that will come.
Fair enough. Thank you.
One point I would make is in regards to the policy guidance around who can put in for what application here. You know, the twin unitaries narrative works in that it's two councils with more than 50% of the population that are proposing a combined model. Now, you could, as the minister, sit there and go, no, that's two separate unitaries, and you've only got one council applying for each one of them. That maybe doesn't fit the model. So there has to be a narrative that makes these twin unitaries as opposed to just individual unitaries, right? So I think that's going to be the part that we're going to have to land and shape together, because you know there is a narrative that says Otago is diverse and different and huge. To go from 5 to 1 in one hit is too fast. So we're going to 2 to bring us closer together for the long term. Maybe that means one Otago. So there's something you've got to think about, because I know there's a lot of different views around that. But that is, you know, we have to have a narrative that makes these twin unitaries combined. There is obviously the shared service provision across the catchment, which is a big part of it. But you know, I'd be interested to hear from anyone around the table who has some sentiment or thoughts as to how we tell that story to make it compelling and compliant.
I'm going to go around the table because everyone wants to speak. So, hey.
I go first.
But no, thank you. So the questions I have are, so the fact that CODC and the district have put this proposal together that brings us along, like that, is there, we have no rights in that, is that what the legislation says? Like if we do nothing today, that it could be just lump us in there, and there's absolutely nothing that we can do about that,
We're just a silent.
regardless of whether we believe that that sort of an amalgamation is going to lead to a shared services model or be more beneficial for our ratepayers and residents. Like, is that's the clarifying point? There is nothing we can do about that.
We're on the journey now. They're two councils, the majority of councils in the affected area have put together a Head Start proposal, and we are on that bus with them. However, as suggested here in the recommendations, we may want to make a specified position on that. I think it's worth pointing out as well, obviously, this is 3 days before we may do something else that is very momentous for our relationship with Central Otago. So we're just also going to be careful in terms of that bigger picture story, because we do need to demonstrate we are absolutely in lockstep.
So, and just to sort of follow up that, but in the real world, if that were to happen, would we and all the people who live in this district just sit here and go, oh, that's what's could happen, and that's what would happen, we think?
Well, if the Head Start proposal was accepted by government, and at this stage we don't really know what the process is that they will work through to determine whether or not a Head Start proposal is a good one or not. It may be that we'll be contacted, we'll be asked our thoughts on it, but we've had no information about that at all at this stage.
The implication is that because they allow a proposal to be put in that brings someone passively into it, who may not be willing, implies that they are going to give themselves the power to enforce a proposal like that if they think it's a good idea, they being the central government.
Seems pretty unequal to me. Processes. Well, yeah, so.
And if that was so that would be the only, if it was the only proposal they had on the table, they don't have any counter position to look at it against. They will only have that if it's the
And I get that, I just think if that was the case, and they said we're going to do this, we would say no regional impact. And we would have some doubts in that process potentially.
Depends on the legislative framework that the government implements to implement the simplification of local government, which they haven't given an indication of what that would be yet.
Thank you. I had sort of got my head around it all with all the moving parts. I'm just wondering, for a lot of our residents who've said QLDC, just go alone. Can we just reflect on that in terms of if we had our time again and restarted this whole process, knowing what we now know, in terms of there were some people who had their fingers on the trigger a bit too early, what would we have done differently if we wanted to go on our own?
Look, I think that going alone is a non-compliant proposal, and the line we're getting given at the moment is, if you're non-compliant, why don't you go to the minister? So I think what we always would have recommended we did was write a separate letter that actually explained we're keen to do this, and this is a piece of work we may do going forward if it becomes possible to do this. Yeah, let's look at that. I think it always would have been rejected. We're led to believe it would always be rejected through the Head Start project. But if it's something that we wanted to seriously consider, there are other ways to do it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that's what I thought in my head, but I think that just answers the question for anyone who's listening as to why we, especially now, why we can't go alone. And now knowing what we're hearing from Central in terms of they want to see something, and if you don't show us something, then it's the proposal on the table that we're probably going to be looking at, because that's the only proposal. So I think that just answers that question. More so people listening to it. Why can't Queenstown stay as it is? Thank you.
Can both of these be submitted? So if we agree with Twin Unitaries, can both QLDC and Cluthers and the other one both be submitted? Is that what will then happen?
Yes, because effectively they would be being dragged by QLDC and Dunedin. So because there's 4 different councils, it's 2 competing proposals with 2 different councils proposing each one.
So potentially both could be submitted.
They can both be submitted.
And it will look like a complete shambles.
Yeah. But one will represent over 80% of the population.
Yeah,
one will
yeah,
represent
okay.
less.
Yeah, that's not my only question. So can we add into our resolution a boundary review?
It'll happen as a matter of course through the process after.
But I'm asking, can we add into the resolution? Because at the moment, I guess that's where I see some benefit, and that it shouldn't just be combining what we've got. It should be looking at where the lines are drawn, and this actually goes So that was my question. I can talk about it more.
I think that would very much fall into the detailed design phase, and because it's the twin unitary piece, it is the whole region.
Mhm.
Where you draw the line to be inland coastal is quite open for discussion.
So you don't think it needs to be added in, or that will definitely happen?
That would definitely be part of the detailed design. It has not been traversed at all.
Just to speak to that, because obviously within those larger amalgamated areas, there's going to have to be that local voice. So where there's a local board, what are the boundaries of those local boards? Who are the communities of interest across those areas? That all needs to come out.
It's a lot of
My next question is with regards to points 4 and 5, and they're both equally confusing to me for this particular point. So at the moment, we've got either inland Otago, both of them say inland or coastal unitary authority, but then it goes on to say with regional council functions supported through a shared services arrangement. So is that the regional council function sitting separately?
I think initially the proposal is that we would develop a transition of the regional council functions into a shared services model, which would then be split between the inland and coastal in some form. So it might be that there'd be for the transition purposes, the vast majority of staff are currently based in the Dunedin area.
Yeah.
You might retain that model for the first 3 years. The same kind of conversations we're having about the water services at the moment. How do you actually work that transition through? So there's a lot of work to be done there as to what that would actually look like in practice.
Yeah. So I would feel more comfortable if we referred to that as a transition piece, because at the moment, to me, it reads like that shared service model would continue. In that sense, I don't see that the regional council functions are coming into the unitary.
I think
Isn't that the definition of a unitary though?
Well, it is, but that's why I don't understand.
I
this,
think
but-
it's a conflict there, but
Yeah.
the definition of a unitary is that
that
the
includes
regional
regional
and
council.
local
But
functions as a team.
You might, in some situations, you might have the functions in-house, and under this model that we're currently suggesting, it would be an outsourced model, effectively, of shared services.
And I guess shared services are more than just a shared services arrangement, maybe, whether that's planning collaboration or consenting, or
It could be,
it could be some of those other economies of scale.
this phrase contains multitudes,
Yeah.
actually, and there's a lot of work in the detailed design phase to really knock down what that looks like. Now, bearing in mind that this proposal has been on the table for a matter of days, that work hasn't been done, but it's signalling an intent towards a shared arrangement between the two. Beyond that, there's no further detail.
Okay. With regards to the detailed design phase, that would only happen if either or the proposals are accepted.
Yeah.
What would be our involvement in that?
Led to believe that would be integral to it.
Yeah.
The detail, I don't think, it's not positioned, is it, that the detailed design will be done unto us.
No, we would do the detailed design,
Okay.
which if it was the CODC Kluka proposal that was accepted, we then have to move into
Yes.
a situation of working collaboratively with them in order to do that design.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not central government doing the design, although they would have a hand in it.
With regards to, it's been mentioned here today, off-ramps, it was talked a lot about in the CODC meeting. What are those? Like, I didn't see anything in their proposal, and I'm feeling like this is not an off-ramp situation.
It has been mentioned in discussion informally with DIA, I think is
Okay.
where that has come from. It has not been traversed in any detail. I have no concept of where and when those off-ramps might appear
Okay.
and what they actually might mean. And given we have just been through a pretty extensive process around the regional deal, like once you are in one of those processes, you are in there and government is expecting your attention. So I think we just need to be a bit careful about the concept of off-ramps and how quickly they might be able to be accessed or readily deployed, and under what circumstances you might be allowed to use them.
last question might be rhetorical. Without the in-depth analysis that staff were unable to make a recommendation, how do we make this?
I think there's a rhetorical question. This is falling back to your knowledge of the district, your experience of being here, your understanding of communities of interest. Unfortunately, I think this process encourages a somewhat populist approach, right?
Yeah.
It's there because there is no other lens through which you're able to look at this information.
Thank you for answering my
We're just one question.
Yep.
All right, so my one question is, do we have any insight into why Iwi supported one unitary Otago authority? Because as was brought up on the call last night, that potentially could be fairly impactful. Do we have it? And because I overthink this too much, what struck me was 7 Runaka are deciding on one unitary authority, which seems like a contradiction of terms.
But effectively, the one unitary they're thinking of, so NATO's position is, and correct me if I get this wrong, anyone else, this doesn't make sense. Effectively, they support the concept of unitaries on catchment basis, as a general. However, they also would like to see a Takiwa-wide overlay that sits across that provides some of the shared services, maybe has overview of water and such. So effectively they are proposing an entirely different system, unitaries, and then another layer that sits across the top that has an overarching coordination role. So it is their one unitary is the whole Takiwa, and it is sort of creating a new layer that sits across the existing unitaries.
Can I talk to that? So, yeah, I've responded to that. One of the Dunedin city councillors put that point last night, who was, I think, the only one who's really in favour of the one Otago model. And that, I heard Justin Tipper talk to that, and I read what Otago had said, and that's not what they said. They said what they want is to ensure the integrity of the catchments, because the water is the most important thing for them. So therefore, I think the changes that or the additional words in the Dunedin City resolution, that the catchment be taken into account becomes relevant, because the Tairi catchment at the moment is split between 3 local authorities. That's not great, and certainly from a Te Ao Māori perspective, it's not. Then the question of the Clutha comes in. So, that is one big catchment. And I think Michelle's right, that would be the best way to deal with that if we get into this situation. We have a couple, at least 2 unitaries, is to have a service entity that does the management of that. Collectively, we do the governance. So
I'm getting some discussion here. Good, okay. We go to the screen, start with Steve and then go to Nikki. Stephen.
Thanks, John. Michelle, that's the DCC proposal talks about catchment based. Can you just explain to me what that means?
Well, they only discussed this about an hour and a half ago. I'm led to believe from my person that was watching it that it was really just an emphasis on the importance of the catchment in this, because part of the criticism of an inland coastal model is that you are effectively splitting the catchment across the middle. So if you had 2 unitaries that operated entirely independently and did not speak to one another and didn't share any services, you are not following a catchment-based model. So my understanding is that wording has been included just to emphasise the fact that the management of the catchment will be imperative in the design of these 2 organisations.
And that's the importance of that regional shared service function as well, because that's where you are able to manage that from, like the regional council does now.
So my second question following up from that is, what happens if we can't agree with the form of the proposal with DCC by Sunday? It can't get lodged, right? So
yeah.
So if it can't get lodged and CDC and QLDC lodge their proposal, then there is only one proposal going in for this district, right?
Yes.
Um,
I would say, Councillor Brent, that I would be suggesting that our proposal is quite a high level proposal, and I think we're in a position to probably find some agreement given the conversation that's happened this morning on that basis. But yes, I mean, there will be devil in the detail with this and going forward. That collaboration between the two organisations will be essential to try and find consensus on this.
So what potentially could happen then is that there is one proposal that goes in from DCC and us, which is very high level, very agreement to agree, and a second proposal that goes in from QLDC and CDC, which is actually quite detailed, which actually does show a catchment proposal. I guess my question is, why wouldn't the government look at that and go, we've got a firm proposal which has got clear boundaries and guidelines versus an agreement to agree?
Well, I think we'd go further than an agreement to agree. I think we can actually put something together that's reasonably compelling based on what we know at the moment. Is getting that narrative right will be essential. Yes, it will need to be an actual proposal for it to be considered. And obviously we've got eyeballs on the central proposal in its draft form at the moment. We will be making sure that if we're going down this other pathway, that it's something comparable in terms of the tone and
quality. Yeah, I mean, I guess where I'm coming from is what I took from last night's discussion was that I don't think it's going to be that easy to agree on the boundaries between these two unitary authorities, and that's where I think there could be problems down the track.
I think you're absolutely. I think that would be very challenging. It would be a difficult conversation, and that would definitely be part of the detailed design stage. And that's where the conversations with the communities are going to become absolutely essential, right? To be able to inform some of that.
Thank you.
Nikki.
I don't actually have any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, thank you. Right, moving quickly on. So, just a couple of questions from myself. So, just to clarify that the ORC have done work in the background, which shows, and I think they've circulated about how they're different models of managing those regional services. So it's not that it has to be one organisation, but that's there.
We would probably reference that as a document and as a decision point as we're going into the proposal.
And
as a document and a possible.
okay. And obviously, in terms of our proximity to central Otago, and a working relationship under a regional deal, I mean, presumably the fact that it was as of neighbouring, sort of councils was because there was a reasonable amount of commonality.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean the good news I think out of this situation is that both proposals, albeit competing proposals, include Up and Central together. If we didn't have that, then I think that would be a complicating factor in our conversations about regional.
Okay, thanks. Any questions?
Thank you. Just to confirm that even without QLDC's agreement, the CDC proposal is a compliant proposal? Okay. So then previously understood that it required a majority of the region. Is that a misunderstanding or something's changed?
No, nothing has changed. It's in the policy advice. There are two ways to put a proposal: either to be the majority of the councils within an area affected, or the majority of the
or any two. It wasn't a majority of the council, any two, wasn't it?
No, you have to, in any proposal, you have to have two councils.
Yes.
But to be compliant, you need the majority of the councils in that.
Or
in that too, in that area.
Yeah.
The distinguishing factor is that it's the area affected by the proposal, not the region. Actually, Councillor Brent, we talked about that point a lot when we had the original session.
So because they're 2 out of 3
within the area affected,
they identify and it's still compliant.
Yes.
Even though it's
a minority.
All right. And I'll just explore this thing. So, as I said, a unitary council is by definition regional council and territorial authorities acting under one umbrella. So why is there the need for this shared services arrangement wording, notwithstanding that can occur as we do with other things anyway? Why does that wording need to be there?
I think just because it provides, frankly, it's the thing that ties the companies together.
It's a transitional.
I think it when we get into the details, like it could be a transitional thing that transitions from a shared service arrangement immediately into something more permanent. However, as I said, there has to be a reason for these to be twin unitaries as opposed to two separate unitaries doing their own thing. And in this sense, the shared service helps actually create that narrative and ensure that the catchment is managed across both unitaries all the way through. If it wasn't a shared service, if it was just diverted into the two unitaries, then there is the risk that you've actually got the headwaters operating differently to coastal.
So the catchment management is a really important part of that. There might be other regional functions that don't make sense to keep at that shared service regional level that come into the councils, but the process still, the detailed design needs to identify what are the things that need to be considered at a regional level because they don't make sense not to, versus the things that can come into councils. I don't think we should assume that everything that's in the regional council goes into this shared service.
Yeah.
It wouldn't. It would just be worked through.
So, notwithstanding the commonality of the Clutha River flowing a catchment through the CDC, they also have a whole bunch of things like coastal environments and you know, obviously different sort of rural. I mean, which one has more weight into like I think the CDC did a pretty good job of demonstrating they don't have many economic or social commonalities with us. But we have a river flowing through, so I just try to reconcile those two things. And the joint unitary that the two twin unitary that we're proposing slightly separates the catchment, and hoping that doesn't trip that up. I suppose, you know, which one, I mean, how do we, there are different reasons to have boundaries in different places. Are they as valid as each other?
I think the intent behind having a coastal and an inland is in recognition that actually the challenges, particularly in that regional functional space, will be quite different in each. And yeah, I think the interesting conversation when you're looking at that kind of scale is how do you apportion those cost places. We talked about a lot in our workshops how in an ideal world you'd be doing this in a functional form kind of an approach, and you'd be starting with grassroots up and working up, and there may need to be some
communities of interest, environments, nature of environments, coastal environments, all that sort of stuff.
And where the investment's lying and where things will be serviced out. And I think all of that needs to be worked through. I would say that's part of the detailed design. And
just to confirm, so it's quite possible that Tyree could be excised from Central Otago and put into the Dunedin unitary if through the detailed design, and that secondly that the community councils model or whatever you want to call it that CODC have argued for in their proposal could still be considered as to how the smaller communities of interest are represented through the design process.
Yeah, because once we get into the design process, you know, they would also be involved in the detailed design. This wouldn't just be on Dunedin and Queenstown.
Okay.
That's our understanding at this point. When we get into that next stage, everyone would be in the room.
Cool, yeah, so with that in mind, then particularly with what's been added to the Dunedin resolution about having a focus on catchments, would it be helpful for us to include that here? Because that will be helpful with those, I think, negotiations.
We have got that in item 5. Yeah. It's not traversed in the report, but 2 unitary catchment-based model. That's what
that's the only change they've made.
Yes,
we've made the same changes they have to the plan. Which is, I presume, just to make clear that in the next, or in forming up the proposal, we make sure that how you manage the catchment is a focus of the twin model. Yeah.
I would suggest that it would probably be helpful, although it's clearly understood by most, that we're actually talking about river catchments, because there are other definitions of catchments, and we've seen them in the Morrison Low report and elsewhere. There's economic catchments. So, but otherwise, I withdraw my question.
Okay.
Luckily, none of mine have been answered, same as you, Matt, and about the community board. So, my other question is, after this, like, let's just say we go with the 2 unitary catchments with Dunedin. How do we then? What's our proposal to then work with the community? Seeming we haven't kind of done our what we should have, not, we couldn't have, like, how we're gonna work with our communities in iwi to bring them on the process and not like be told that this is what's happening.
I think preparing the proposal in the next 5 days, we'll share it, but it's not going to be part of the engagement process. However, that detailed design phase, I think we would be bringing to the room, part of that detailed design is to have the detailed design of a communications and engagement plan and the full community participation plan woven into how it's developed.
Yeah.
We at this stage, we know nothing about what that next stage might look like, or who's necessarily leading it, or the timeline of, well, we know a bit more about the timeline of run. I think it's over the next 12 months. Is that the detailed design? Yeah.
That will be doing the detailed design. So even we just heard recently that the government's likely to only actually accept 6 and do 6 to start with because they don't have bandwidth.
Yeah.
We'll still do that detailed design.
No, only if our Head Start proposal is
Right.
accepted would we go on to that. Now, what I would say is that there's a possibility when we find out the results of whether the proposals are accepted or not, as to how this council wants to respond to that. And there could be a conversation there around, well, actually, Dunedin, do we want to continue to explore this via another pathway? So it doesn't take it off the table.
Yeah, then we could also engage with the community then as well. Yeah, anyway, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Okay, I've got one more about that.
Okay.
So, given that the CDC proposal could go in regardless anyway, without us necessarily needing to agree to it or not, do we need to include a decision on whether we agree with that proposal or not? Or it's still a three?
Yeah, I mean,
Can we just let it lie as it is? We can do what they want.
you
And
could
just focus on what our preference, if our preference is for, 4 or 5.
you could. I think, in putting these together, there is some, there is some procedural hygiene in having some clarity from this council, a decision point.
It's a great term.
I think it would be helpful to be able to say, at that meeting, we decided we did not support.
The reason I ask is that, as you've mentioned, we're sitting on an agreement with CDC on other matters, and by not supporting something that they're proposing, it doesn't seem to be a very good signal at this particular day.
It's not wonderful, but you would equally be showing you still very much want to be conjoined to them in Inlander.
It's actually more consistent with
Yeah.
regional.
It's actually more consistent.
I mean, I can't help thinking too that both of these now are very similar. And they come down to a line on a map. That's not really very good. What are we arguing about?
We've got, so we've been, the question is, we've got some options on the table, and there's one Head Start proposal that's heading to Wellington. We are being asked to decide whether we agree to that or whether we prefer another alternative. If we want to do another alternative Head Start, we have one alternative, which is to support the position that's been taken by Dunedin. That's the only two viable options that are proactive. Otherwise, sitting back and doing nothing, I think there's still a process that's going to happen to it.
Okay.
Just that.
It is a question,
okay.
just about definition of what majority means. So it says that, and I'm looking at page 20 of the paper of the agenda, where it's got examples of what majority might mean. So if we have the CDC model, which includes us, which yes, technically is a majority, but is it by population of the region?
No, because of the majority of the affected councils.
Right.
That's 2 out of 3 councils.
However, when you look at, so whereas the alternative, DCC and QLDC, is entirely the majority because it's everyone. So only one application can be considered because it is clearly the majority. Is that correct?
So the criteria is that it has to be from a majority of directly affected councils or two or more councils representing a majority of the population. Now, whether the government accepts them both, they may not accept them both because they may say, we only want one
Yeah.
proposal from this region, and we're going to accept this one and not that one.
because.
So they're technically compliant, but the government will only, well, they will only accept one of them.
And we've known from the outset that there was a risk with a cargo with 5 councils that it could go either.
Easily.
You could end up with,
Yes.
So,
for example, 1 and 2.
Yeah, so because the CODC proposal includes, include the proposal, actually does include Dunedin City, but by taking some of it on board, so therefore that whole qualifying issue may come up later, but
I think we're beyond questions.
Question, just a clarification with Penny. Question, you said if it represents the majority of the population, we with DCC represent 75 to 80%. We with CODC plus CDC represent less than 50%. So in fact, if you balance those two, the only one that government can accept is ours plus DCC, correct? No.
It's the population of the affected area
Because there are a majority of councils.
or a majority of councils. So it's one or the other.
So basically, the Cooper one, that is compliant because they've got 2 out of the 3 councils, even though it's not the majority of the population. Our one is compliant, provided that we very clearly make them from unitaries, because then we've got more than 50% of the population between ourselves and Dunedin. If, however, we don't make that narrative about the twin unitary component strong enough, and it just looks like we're just putting in 2 separate unitaries, then we're not compliant.
What's
Because
the difference between twin unitary and 2 separate unitaries?
it's the qualification status. So you have to have 2 councils putting in a proposal. So it's got to be clear that it's 2 councils putting in a proposal for the twin unitaries. Otherwise, it's just 1 council putting in for a coastal unitary and 1 council putting in for an inland. And that's
Not 2 proposals and 1 proposal.
would not be
It
compliant.
would be us putting in a joint proposal.
Yes.
Yeah.
If it was 2 separate proposals, one from us and one from Dunedin, that wouldn't be compliant. So it's a joint proposal for 2 unitaries and a shared service.
All clear?
it's very clear here.
Right, so I think we're done with questions. And we have all the words. And I think just to frame up where we're at, and because when the Head Start proposal was announced, then the mayors of Otago decided the best way to deal with this was to try and land a solution collaboratively. And there was the Morrison Lowe report, regardless of what you think about how accurate it is, there was some good stuff in there, which is useful. But what became apparent was that it wasn't going to be an option that everyone around the table would sign up to as mayors. You know, from the mayors sort of doing their sense check of their councils through that we do our workshops or through our community engagement, there was not one option that really said, yeah, everyone could do that. And even when you look at the survey of the across the target of the issues that were important to our communities, there's vast differences. And if you look at the Morrison Lowe report, there's a wonderful page which talks about, you know, the decile, the capital value, the different types of employment. And, you know, we are far, far closer to Dunedin, ironically, than we are to Luther or Central Otago. So, you know, it's such a multi-dimensional problem. But to me, the greatest tyranny is distance. Because the bigger you go, the harder it gets. And, you know, we're in a big river system with a big catchment. And that's fine. We need to manage that. And everyone understands that we need to manage the rivers. It's, you know, I think, and part of the tension is we all think we'd like to manage the rivers, but probably catchments, but for different purposes. And I was suggesting that the people in the other clues have a very different view of the valuable than those people who maybe live further down the street, because it's different values that we have. So, having worked and looked at with the regional deal with Central Otago, they do feel close, and we see, you know, that linkages between Cromwell, you know, that sub-regional Cromwell, Wanaka, Queenstown, all those needs that we know for sub-regional transport. And equally, you know, the huge amount of with the clues there, a lot of their business is through Dunedin, whether that's for exports or other services. So there are some distinct patterns. So the bigger you go, the harder it gets to make decisions. And then if you have one really big council, then it's like, how do you get past this case? Because the bigger it is, the more full-time jobs you get, as we see from Auckland. And it then gets harder to bring people into it. And I think, listening to the comments at Public Forum from the fed farmers, I see the emails where fed farmers are advocating quite strongly against some of the things that we're trying to achieve as a council with our landscape values. Some lobbying of government that all that work should be scrapped and things for a number of reasons. So the concern for me is that the bigger we get, the more we lose our focus on the things that each council needs to deal with. We've got some real pressing stuff that we need to deal with, and I think all clues to have, and I'm sure that they have. The bigger we get, the harder it is to maintain that focus, unless you just duplicate everything we do now, in which case there's no savings. So I am comfortable with the proposal that involves us at Central Otago. I think that's a really, really good fit. It's it minimises the distance of representation, but still allows us to get those economies of scale. And that's I think that in my ideal world, the mayors would have taken the time and reflected, because there was no one option. The option to say, actually, we want to work this properly. We want to really do that function over form review. And I suggested that we have 2 councillors from each council, sorting this out over a number of months, because it's supposed to be the most fundamental reform of local government in 30 years, and we're putting it together over the course of a weekend. So, and that I've found in all of this probably the hardest. A couple of us mayors, certainly Mayor Barker in Dunedin and myself, have probably burned quite a bit of political capital about trying to be collegiate. We know there's a significant pressure from our own community, from the business community. Those say, just go and make a case for Queenstown Lakes because we're unique, and we could potentially get that across the line. But at the same time, when we are partnering and going to partner with a neighbouring council, that's the trade-off, right? So I'd hoped we'd actually end up with those sort of discussions, and we would naturally find an agreement. And over the course of 4 days, that changed, and that's my personal disappointment that we're in the position now, because we should have been in a position where we would have had more time to do it then. So that's probably all I'm going to say by way of introduction. And let's go around the table this way. Start
We
with
need to put the motion first.
Oh, yeah, probably a good idea.
I'll move. Can I move?
Yeah, you can move.
I'm happy to move that we, so recommendation 1, 2, agree that QLDC does not support the unitary in the way that it's been couched by those 2 local authorities. So 1, 2, 5, agree to work with Dunedin City in a 2 unitary cash-based model, 6, 7 and 8. That's what I've moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've been on record to say that I'm been really frustrated by Head Start, that it's been a waste of oxygen, and that it's a distraction from us getting on with the issues that we face, which we've obviously discussed earlier today, and trying to find a way forward. So that's my first frustration. The second is that we've tried to collegially go down a route to develop something that the whole region was on board with, and to take more time to do that. And we have been absolutely robbed of that opportunity, and I'm really upset about that. Absolutely robbed of it. And we are now faced with either a compliant proposal that we haven't been asked to contribute to, or engage in the development of, which is really frustrating, or to take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and be somewhat in charge of our own destiny. And I'm really torn because the right thing for us to do is to get this to touch and leave it on the table. Not leave it on the table, but to take our time to develop it. That is the correct and right thing for us to do on behalf of our communities, but we've been robbed of that opportunity, and we have to possibly, and I'm still, to be fair, I'm still slightly torn on this, is to take this by the bull by the horns and actually entertain something that we've already entertained. We've already undertaken work through the regional deal. I don't feel any connection in issues or to Clutha District Council, and I certainly don't to Dunedin. So I think that the only one that makes sense geographically is for us to determine an appropriate boundary with inland and coastal. We've been forced into it, and we'll work through that. I do want to make sure local democracy is protected through whatever means, local boards, local community councils, whatever it is, and that an appropriate boundary is found, which I think logically doesn't include the Taieri for us because it's a different catchment. This provides some, and we're still faced with a situation where this may or may not proceed depending on what happens in November. So I'm leaning towards, I'm not, as I said, I'm not sold yet, but I'm leaning towards supporting this proposal just to retain some control over our destiny that's been taken away from us. So, thank you, John.
I equally am not happy with the approach that has been imposed on communities and local authorities around the country with the agenda of the government pushing. Yes, some things are good to get done more quickly, but some things require time and due consideration about what the issues actually are and what the opportunities are and what the consequences are. And with the Head Start approach, that's almost impossible. So we need to try and make the most of a poor situation. I think one of the big focuses for me, there's probably two. One is that we have the agreement around the regional deal. So we have already the base of a strong partnership, which only builds on strong partnerships we have with Central Otago anyway, through our increasingly shared economy, shared recreation resources, a whole bunch of things. And yes, a river or two runs through it. That's not the case as been outlined for the district. However, I don't think that in the long run, through the process of if it does continue, that Clutha would necessarily, the communities of Clutha would necessarily be entirely ruled out of this, because it may be that a narrower approach to eventually the boundaries of what a Clutha, rather than inland, a Clutha unitary authority might be like, might include that, with the Taieri moved off to Dunedin, and so therefore it could be included. But my other major concern is the way that this has been done by, particularly Clutha District Council, but Central Otago District Council, by not consulting with us, by attempting to take what is essentially a hostile takeover within this process, and within the context of the regional deal, that I find highly problematic, and we need to be able to deal with that maturely, attempt to re-establish the relationship with QLDC over this, and again, make the most of the situation. Because the part that I find most frustrating in this is this accentuation of a view that we are different communities just because some of us live in rural areas and some of us live in urban areas. That urban-rural divide is not helpful. We are all in this together. Local government until 1989 was divided on those lines. We had boroughs, which were urban areas, we had counties that were rural areas. It has actually worked much better when we've been in together as districts and as larger cities with urban and rural areas. We have more of a balance. This rural-urban divide is not helpful. doesn't serve us well. We would be better to do this with related communities and economies, work out the details later, and do so closely with Mana Whenua, so that in particular, their values are reflected through this process. So I'll be voting in favour of this.
I'll try and be quick, given the time. Yeah, I found it really interesting how many perspectives have been shared with us. I don't think I've had so many correspondents as we have with Head Start, but they've all been quite siloed in thinking, which I find really hard. It's very economy based, or water catchment based, or social based, or business based, and I'm finding it very hard to make a decision without such a holistic view, hence why we haven't got a recommendation from staff. And it's just not really good governance to do this. However, as we've noted, we're kind of pushed this way. So I think this is, yeah, I think this is the best outcome that we can get to now. And I think we'll do our best. No.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess my message is consent is important.
Wow.
Very on.
Mic drop.
Yeah, just to sort of acknowledge the elephant in the room. I mean, I was looking at the average house prices, $450,000 versus Queenstown Lakes is 1.7 million. So designing a rating system where you have 4 times capital value is crazy. I mean, I won't repeat sort of previous points, because I think we've all made clear a lot of the, you know, frustration of the position that we're in, and also a lot of the care that needs to be taken to the process moving forward. I think, you know, like looking at local boards for local issues, unitary council for sub-regional issues, shared services arrangement as our regional sort of land base. It gives us an opportunity to look at how public service and infrastructure can be delivered at the right level still. And, you know, I think there is a lot to be said about, again, building strong relationships moving forward with us, and sort of leading with not an agnostic, you know, ethereal, we don't really know, I don't really care, and actually just sort of starting to be quite direct around some of the things that make sense. But yeah, I support the proposal that's been made for obvious reasons, and I don't think of anything else to add to it. To move forward.
Good.
Yeah, no, it's no.
I mean, for me, I can see where the CODC, CDC proposal has come from. I think Clutha District finding themselves a little bit out on a limb, and they perhaps don't see they align with Dunedin City Council very closely, and you know, and maybe more with us. I think, as I mentioned before, we have got instances where we work across those districts quite happily. The one that stands out to me, and the one I'm most familiar with, is you know, in the sport, our rugby arrangements quite happily cover that area, and it has done for longer than I can remember. Where we have an Otago regional, or Otago rugby football, and then we split up into Otago Country and Metro for the competitions, and then further we split up into Central Otago and South Otago within that country region. You know, it's not to say that something similar couldn't work in a district council or in a council basis, unitary basis. I sort of also had a little analogy for me too. I've got a very close friend who we were born a couple of weeks apart. He's my cousin's cousin. Now, he's not my cousin, but he's still a very good friend. And that relationship also, you know, applies, I think, a little bit in my mind to Clutha, Central Otago, and us. I'm sort of thinking that I don't need to not support their arrangement, their proposal. I don't see a need to not support that explicitly. If they want to put their proposal in, then that's fine. We're part of it. If they've, you know, asked us to be part of it, we're not necessarily supporting it by joining it, but I don't see why we need to not support it. Because, you know, who knows what's down the track, we may end up being subject to that proposal anyway. Yeah, so I'm a little bit torn on that aspect. And also try to put myself in their position. If I was in their position, I'd probably be doing the same thing. if I was a councillor in that district. I can see, I can fully understand where it's coming from. And I don't think putting in no proposal is a good idea. I do think we need to be putting something in, whether we're agreeing to another proposal, putting in our own one, or both of those. I don't think not putting anything in is a good option at this point in time.
Please, anything to add? Maybe a little bit. I'll go through brief, but thank you. Yeah, I just still can't fathom how this could be forced upon us, the way that it feels like it's going to be forced upon us. I don't want to sit here and say, you know, Queenstown's too special and we don't need some evaluation. I think we do. I think local government across the country does need some work, but just not the way that this Head Start proposal is trying to do it. Yeah, I think, I don't know, if I think about, yes, we want to support the proposal in front of us from QLDC and Clutha District. We lose because we weren't part of it. If we go with the Dunedin proposal, Clutha potentially loses because they're not part of that. Well, they weren't consulted in that. And I just don't like the feeling of a couple of competing proposals going for our districts. I think it's way more important than that. Yeah, I'm still thinking, you know, if the unitary, or if we split it into unitaries, is it only Otago that we're talking about in the DCC proposal? I know there's talk of Waitaki. Would we be looking sort of south border and south as well, potentially, which I don't think's been addressed. I just think at the moment there's way too much uncertainty. There's been no consultation with anybody that this is really and truly going to affect, including us. And there's been no financial metrics that I can understand. I've tried to read through what's come through to us and how that might land and come back to capital values and things like that. And the fact that this is an election year, I think this is all noise coming from the government of the day. And they've been said always on the case, oh, let's just do something instead of nothing. This is my exception for that. I don't think we should do anything at this point in time, so I don't think we can.
About the Southland aspect. So the Otago mayors early in the stage did approach the Southland mayors to see if they wanted to take a bigger picture view or look at cross-boundary issues, and they declined. They wanted to do their own thing in Southland because they were already involved in our local government commission process anyway. So it's been quite a complex story in Southland. But
if there wasn't a Head Start, or there wasn't desperation to get into it, there'd be more.
And I think just to add to that, sorry, speaking out of turn, but yeah, I think there's a lot of similarity between Gore District Council and Clutha District Council, right? And yeah, so who knows what might fall out of whatever path we enter into. But I think all those things are actually.
Okay, similar to Heath, I think this is election year and there is a lot of popular politics floating around, giving us 90 days to simplify local government, which is a very complex process. It's absolutely absurd, but that's where we're at, unfortunately, creating chaos. I think local democracy is at threat, and I'm just going to leave that there. Now to the proposal of CODC and CDC. The reality for me, every time I keep thinking about this, is we are a 3-stage economy, 3-stage growth, 3-stage communities, and 3 stages with our environment. So I just can't see how the 3 work together, but I do understand where the rural community is coming from, trying to protect their values, and I do not hold that against them at all. But at the same time, when we look at those views and values, they just simply do not align. I did an exercise with myself and I took out CODC from the proposal. And I thought, well, what would it look like if CDC and QLDC merged together? And it just is absolutely absurd. It's a marriage destined to fail. And I do wonder whether CDC is just trying to escape a bad partner in DCC. But they may actually end up in the same consequence if they end up with QLDC. So this is, again, just stuff that randomly works through my head. What I'm probably thinking is the only decision that would satisfy the rural community is if they had a rural unitary authority. And unfortunately, we have gotten so far down the track that that is no longer an option for us at this stage. if we look at CODC and us, there is more alignment, and we've got this regional deal on the table. With the current proposal with CODC and CODC, and excuse me for all the Cs, they have already indicated that they are willing to work and amalgamate with QLDC in their current proposal with CDC. They also have a regional deal that they have agreed to, which we also have potentially done the same, who knows. So there is alignment there. The government likes that marriage as well. And so if, in finishing, I'll give you my options. Plan A was QLDC stand on its own. As we've discussed, that's not an option. So my new plan A is QLDC and CODC going in together. But I also need to think about a plan C, because if the government says, no, sorry, that's not adequate, what's our next option? And that may be the proposal that CODC and CDC have already put in. So that's where I will finish.
Thank you, Matt. Nicola.
I'm just going to start with a point of clarification. When you proposed 5, that was without the word subject to the agreement of both councils.
Yeah.
Cool. So I agree with a lot of what people have said today. I agree. I listened to the CODC. I heard where they were coming from. What doesn't sit well with me is I feel like we are doing to them what they did to us, and I don't feel comfortable with that. But I also do not feel comfortable doing nothing. I never wanted to do nothing. My preferred option was 2 urban, 1 rural. I still think it has good ideas, but we're just in this situation that no one else supported or came up with that, so we're stuck. So I will likely reluctantly support this because it's the best of a bad bunch of options, which is not how I want to go into this. I want to make clear and have on record that with this proposal, and when to support the head path proposal, that the boundaries are not defined. That is really important to me, and whatever proposal goes forward, that those boundaries are assessed as part of the detailed design process.
Thank you. All these are bad options, so I'm just looking for the least bad option. And so my preferred option is exactly what he said, which is do nothing, step back, we need more time. But I don't think that's an option. I don't think it'll be accepted by central government. My next least bad option is for QLDC to remain within its boundaries and have a, if you want the Melissa White option of having 3 unitaries. Again, I don't think central government will accept that. And so a lot of this is around gaming central government, which is a question I asked you last night. And you said, well, yeah, in terms of certain individuals at central government, if you turn them down, they tend to double down. So where that leaves me is that the next least bad option is item number 5. I don't get hung up on catchments. Rivers all over the world have boundaries across them, national boundaries, state boundaries, what have you. We happen to be at the headwaters. That's an advantageous place to be. So I don't think the catchment is really such an issue. I also don't think that Iwi's argument about catchments really holds water, sorry for the pun, because I think actually that Seven Ranaka feel it's easier to deal with 1 council than 5 or 4 or 3. Federated Farmers is also about water. It's not about anything else other than controlling the water. So then I opt back to our Chamber of Commerce, which actually I feel some sort of a bit of loyalty to. They want us to maintain the boundaries. Within option 5, we still maintain our boundaries. We just expand our boundaries. And so option number 5 puts us in the driver's seat, and it preserves our optionality. And I also do believe, I think, Matt, it was your idea, that we should include why the CDC and CODC option does not make sense. So for me, again, number five is the 4th of 4 bad options, but to me, it's the most palatable in terms of joining with the need as a twin, correct? That's the operative word, not 2 unitary twin.
Yeah, that's it too.
Catalan based, and putting that proposal forward because we represent 75% of the region's population and much more in terms of its GDP. And I think it would be very hard to turn down.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to go to Nikki and then Stephen.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this has been an interesting one for me because I've turned around quite quickly. I started from a very principled position of needing to start from scratch and look at the functions and then look at the structures that would best deliver them based on the scales and based on criteria. And I thought, there's a real opportunity there, but we can't do that, obviously. And what the government's putting us is nuts in the context of everything else that we need to do. But there are opportunities here, and I do think we need to look at it really positively and what we can achieve through this process, because there are things to achieve. We do need to find efficiencies. Anyway, so the other thing is, I sort of mentioned at the start that, the process that they've put us into is bound to cause relationship issues, right? It's not a good setup for making friends and keeping them. But I do think we need to be really conscious of not letting that process break down relationships that we're going to need to maintain over time. So everything we should do, we should be minded to, ensuring that those relationships improve rather than deteriorate. And in saying that, I do think we need to put ourselves in the shoes of Clutha and CODC. I can understand, how this came about. Don't agree with it, don't agree with the way it came about, but they didn't have the benefit of time either. I'd like to thank Mayor Barker and the Dunedin councillors for being open to this. Working constructively at the last minute and for everything that was said in the meeting. I think they've done a really good job. I don't think this is a bad option. Now, I don't actually now. I think we can work through some of that functional stuff through detailed design. I think, what we're putting in is a really high level proposal. There's all sorts of stuff that's going to fall out of detailed design, including all the sort of structures and shared arrangements. And so there's, there will be time to work through that. So that gives me a bit of comfort. I think we need to be really clear that we don't support the CODC proposal, and that's just to be really clear to the people assessing the two models. They're both going to go into government. They're both going to get assessed. If we're very clear that we don't support one, that assists our proposal in moving forward. Why I prefer this model, I think inland versus coastal makes a lot of sense on an issues basis, on a growth profile basis. Cody made the point about rating model basis, and that's a fair point as well. But for me, the biggest thing is good governance and having a functional council. And we hear a lot about functional councils at the moment and through this process. And I think to be a functional council, you need to be able to be in the room together. I think, the fundamental problem for me, because we're a really big region, is the length of that and the length that you have to travel to get to a meeting. And with unitary authorities, I'd like to think that there are going to be more meetings and that we're going to have to meet more often for longer to resolve more issues. So I just don't understand how we do that and how we ensure that representation from across the district, from families, from young people, from everybody gets around that table, and how we build relationships and sort of work past our conflicts. So that's sort of a number one reason for me. And so, I support the proposal. Thanks for hearing me out.
Cool. Stephen, lucky last.
Thank you. I just reflect that I don't have the view that this is some sort of reverse takeover by CODC and CDC. I actually just think it's them trying to protect themselves and do the best that they can. And that's what happens when nothing much happens. People, they've gone to do something that might help themselves. So I actually applaud them for what they've done, because it has actually brought us all to a head, and brought us all to a head, hopefully in a scenario that ends up with not just one unitary authority for the whole of Otago, because that's one of my deepest fears in this whole scenario. Our option to do nothing is not on the table, because if we don't do something with DCC, then CODC and the CDC can still proceed. So our option to do nothing is simply not there. We have to do something. I do have a concern that the relationship that we're going into with DCC is an agreement to agree, and there'll be, potential issues to be that might not get resolved in terms of where the boundaries are. So I do have a concern over the fact that we're comparing an agreement to agree with some pretty clear boundaries as per the CODC/CDC model. But I might just have to get over myself and just trust that we'll get to a good decision there.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not going to sum up or anything, we're just going to go back to a vote.
Can I just close, so I put it? I really like what Councillor Brent said there about taking a positive approach to this. And that, although none of us want to be in this situation, that CODC and Clutha have brought us to this point. That's not just a point whereby this isn't DCC or QLDC even thinking that they're taking over the other local authorities. We are now in this together if this proposal goes forward. We agree this today. So we need to work with them to come up with solutions that will work effectively. I'd like to see a letter go to the mayors of those local authorities to try and build those bridges from the DCC and QLDC mayors, because we're all in this together. I also think we do need to emphasise to the minister in both the letter in relation to number 2 here and then with the proposal that our preferred option is that we would be standalone, at least initially, in this process. And there is enough special circumstances to say that we should be. And we can make that very clear. Our next preferred option is a 2-unitary model.
I don't think that's what's on the
No.
table.
I know.
You
but
can't
all
do
I'm
that,
saying
John.
Is that I'm saying
No.
is that
No, sorry.
No.
I put the motion. I can then talk to it to close the motion before we vote.
It's not what we're voting on.
I'm not saying we're going to vote on.
Okay, let's just bring the discussion. No, I'm not going to go back around the table again.
No.
Very minor amendment proposal, very super minor.
Well,
But just to catch one minor point there, but just say that item 2, part 1, that we write a letter to Minister Bishop and the mayors of Central Otago and CDC. That's all I'm suggesting.
Yep, I'd be happy with that.
Well,
no, that's okay. That's all right. It's you that wanted to be out here by 2.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's controversial,
Yeah.
I'll leave it.
No, that's okay. So we're rewinding, we're pausing standing orders, John. We just clarify what the update is, please. Okay, authorise mayor to sign pair of letters to Minister Bishop and the mayors of
CADC and CDC.
Yeah.
I mean, they deserve a
Yes.
They're probably watching.
They will be, but
Okay.
I'll move that amendment.
I'm happy to second it.
Secondly, Councillor White, so we now have an amended resolution. Yeah, okay. Deacons, are you okay with that?
I'm absolutely.
But we have to vote on the amendment first.
Yeah, well, just checking with John who moved it, because he'd already had started to try to reply.
I'm not sure how we do that. Item number 5, rather than 2 unitary catchment bays, when?
Well,
I don't think there's any difference to be known.
It would be good to mirror the
Shall?
Dunedin
Which
motion.
The 2-unitary catchment is Dunedin's language. The twin unitary model is kind of what we've discussed. And there is a subtle difference to it. You could take it either way. If you wanted to be really clear that it was all about the twin arrangement rather than 2 units.
that would be kept in the proposal though.
It will be
That
captured.
one the Dunedin City Council to be a decision.
Okay, so we've got a vote on amending those words that are on the screen about writing a letter. Those in favour, please show. Okay, that is carried amended. John, would you like to finish your closing?
No, thanks, not with the reception I received. I think that was highly inappropriate. We're trying to do this collectively in a positive way. I was trying to build a bridge. I got leapt on. That was inappropriate. I'd like us to put it to the vote. Thank you.
Okay, vote in parts.
Do we have
So
two should be separate and four, 5, 6 and 7 could be separate as well.
Oh, and one, but just take those separately.
Okay. So. Do you want all those parts? Separate?
Just take two separately first.
Okay, all right, let's, so put item 2 on the agenda, updated as amended. Those in favour, please show. And,
Let's just put number 2, just we're just voting on number 2.
yep,
Just rejecting the.
okay, those against,
I'll vote for number 2.
okay,
So we're just rejecting the CODC.
Those,
okay, no,
We need to take each one individually. I think you just get yes or no on each because.
Okay.
Either or nature of it.
yep. Okay, so let's just start with number 1, all those in favour, no, report.
This is just one.
Yeah. We're gonna go through it one at a time.
Yeah.
Okay, so that number 1 is carried. We've just voted on number 2, which is carried. Okay, so, 3 then
Is cancelled.
fails.
Point of, point of order, we're not voting because it was only 1, 2, 5, 6, 7 and 8 that were put.
Yeah.
Yeah.
3 and 4 went.
Thank you.
So 5 is next.
Yeah,
Without another equal.
Strike out the whole.
yeah, 3.
Oh, I see what you mean. 5 is given you 3.
Okay. Sure.
Oh, right.
We're
Well,
going to
well done.
three.
Yep, so we're now the last 3.
Down 3. So those in favour of item 3, please show.
We-
Okay.
Hang on.
We didn't put 3.
Oh, no.
And we're
Did we?
Yeah, because it was.
modifying-
On the screen, 3 becomes 5.
And you might not.
Oh,
want to
okay.
do 3,
Thank you for
so-
clarifying.
Yeah, okay,
Um,
shall we just show again? So 3, which was the old 5. Okay, any against? No. Thank you. That is carried. So we're now going to move on to number 4, which is the old 6. Depending on which version you're looking at. Those in favour, please show. Okay, those against. That's carried. And then I think we could probably take 7 and 8, or what was 5 and 6, or the other way around. 5 and 6, what was 7 and 8, I should take those, and the recorded votes, those in favour, please show. Those against, that is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. That's on section. So well done.
Sure, probably.
Yes, thank you.
Please.
Yes,